So this is a conference that's sponsored by Wisconsin Farmers Union and Wisconsin Towns Association. I'm Tom Quinn. I'm the Executive Director of Farmers Union. In your packets, you have kind of an agenda for the day. We laid it out to have some presentations from some of the most knowledgeable people about the industry, and some of the people who have worked closest with local communities in helping to address issues and solve problems. And you develop tools that can be practical, democratic tools. And so we want to share those with you today. And we want to give you a chance to talk to the presenters and also to talk to each other. So thanks for coming. We did one of these with the Towns Association about 4 years ago when the environment in the industry was at the beginning of the boom stage, and we had, I think, two conferences with 700 people. And it was interesting over the years to watch that many of the tools that were put together in those toolboxes were used by local towns, by county government. I myself am a county board member, in addition to being in Farmers Union. So I've been through some of the local democratic processes and procedures and know well the kind of issues and pressures that you all strain, and the desire to do a good job and do the right thing for your community. So we'll start off with a short presentation from myself, sort of looking a little bit at the overview of kind of where we are with the industry, not very in-depth, not very complicated. And then Mike from the Towns Association will give a perspective on local government's role in all of this. And then, even though it's kind of a short period of time, we'll take a very quick break for anybody who wants to get some coffee or refreshments, and then we'll come back, and Paul Kent will do sort of the very sort of thoughtful work he does of explaining how to use the tools in the practical setting of local government, local democracy. So let's see, and then we'll break for lunch. We'll do a buffet lunch. Come back in here and eat wherever you want to, or at the table you're at now. Then we'll have an afternoon session, and at the end we'll do a breakout where in this room we'll have one session, and then in the room behind that curtain there we'll have another session. So it should be a very good day. Thanks for coming. So anyway, let me. We're getting a little behind here, so I'll hang on to this. So let's see if this works. What we thought we'd do is just do a real quick kind of overview about, okay, so what's the situation, what can we expect from the perspective of Farmers Union. Our interest in this is primarily economic and environmental and social. We're concerned about rural communities and this opportunity and the relative cost and benefits that come with it, understanding it and how it works. So anyway, first, there we go. Okay. So the first couple ones are just general, generic things that we use in local meetings. I'll go through them real quick. You all know the answer to these questions, so it's not like rocket science to you. It's interesting, this one on the bottom, it says, of course, the rapid expansion of fracturing in the oil and gas industry and the comparatively high prices back then, when it started out, was what pushed the beginning of the frac sand drive. And as you talk to developers, you would hear this phrase, speed to market. There was this real market opportunity. And the opportunity and the need to take advantage of that meant that you had to get on the ground quickly. And so private business does a very good job of doing that. Government works, as people say, good government is slow government. And so there's often this sort of tension between the speed to market interest of the private sector and the need for local government to really balance interest. And that's kind of, we went through that phase, and I think it was an interesting experience for all of us. You probably know what mine looks like. And you know what hydraulic fracturing is. Interesting that in 2014, 24 million metric tons of sand. 44% of the U.S. supply came from Wisconsin. That's, again, a familiar picture to most of you for what a frac sand mine looks like. Here's the area, again, a map that's commonly seen. We all probably live, everyone here probably lives in the western part to the southern part of that area. And this is based on the September 1st, 2015 DNR records, which you can get online. This is a summary of basically mining operations that are current in Wisconsin. So you've got the 129 facilities, mines and processing facilities, active as of the DNR's records on that date, 85, inactive 40, and in the process of being reclaimed 4. There are, of course, if you talk to anybody in any county, there are a range of permitting things for the permitting process, and we don't have a total of those. Steve may have some of that later on in his presentation, I'm not sure, but those are interesting numbers to look at. Total acreage, 33,000 in 2015. Areas in active mining, 22,000. Inactive, and the number of counties with some kind of a processing, mining, or transport rail site, 21. So it's becoming an industry that has an impact on a broad part of our area. And again, these are from the DNR. And this is a breakdown by county of what's happening in the various counties. In terms of operating facilities. And again, this doesn't deal with facilities that are in the process of being permitted or planned or land being leased or any of those elements. A lot of activity in a lot of counties. Some of it depends upon whether or not the counties have, what kind of regulatory authority and zoning the counties have. Some of it depends on just the areas of the companies have chosen as being the most promising for development. That is a familiar map again, sort of showing where they are. The pins indicate where some of the inactive and active sites might be. So, you know, fracturing really took off with the expansion of the technology in areas in Texas, of course, and in Bakken and North Dakota, and in the eastern areas where gas is the primary focus. Again, in 2015, the oil and gas sector bought 72% of the industrial sand. And in between 2009 and 2015, the number of industrial frac sand mines in Wisconsin increased from 10 to 129 in just about 5 years. And that's, again, a typical chart that shows the relationship between horizontal drilling and the use of sand. And as hydraulic fracturing has increased, on the vertical axis, the volume of sand that's being used has also increased. And that's what's affected us. That's what's caused the industry to have this rapid expansion in our state. So again, a summary of where we're at. In 2009, we had 5 industrial mines, 5 processing plants. Some of those have been around for a while. By July of 2011, up to 16, 25 being proposed. By 2012, 95, 20 proposed. 2013, 112. And in September 15, 129 industrial frac sand facilities being proposed for that area of Wisconsin where the focus of the sand is. Some of that's, again, a repeat. It's interesting to see that, you know, crude oil in 2014, when the boom really took off, was around $100 a barrel. and it is now, as of December 2015, down around $35 in a barrel. And that's caused a commensurate drop in the demand for frac sand, ranging from 30 to 40%. And the estimates are that the frac sand industry would shrink from a $4.5 billion industry to a $2 billion industry. It's going to maintain itself, obviously, but the expectations, if you look at the industry materials and the independent materials, is that it would lower itself to a more steady state operation. And then PacWest, which is one of the industry sources that's often quoted in the news around here, predicting that supply will increase this year still, and then you figure the whole year the demand will drop by 22%. And all, of course, is tied to crude oil and gas. And this chart is from the Energy Information Agency, which is the agency of the government. They publish things on a regular basis, with, I would have to say, kind of a mixed record of accuracy, of projected accuracy, but they have a lot of information. And so they kind of hedge their bets. They say, well, on the one hand, it's going to go back up. On the other hand, it's going to stay the same. And then there is unfortunately, on one perspective, some indication that we may see continued and even lower energy prices. I know when you watch if you pay attention to the business news, last week there was one day when there was confidence that oil was going up, and then in the morning and by afternoon they realized that the drop in inventories was actually offset by an increase in inventories in distillate products, and also by the evidence that there was a fairly large number of tankers waiting off Texas to offload oil into the storage facilities there. So probably the hardest thing in the world to predict is the oil price, and we are now part of that cycle. So interesting development. We all have stories about what's happened since the price of sand went down and the demand went down. There certainly have been a number of public closures, layoffs, it's not public information generally, so it's difficult to pull together exactly what those impacts are, but we all know them, and they're out there just going on. So the economic risks that were apparent early on are now always there, or are now appearing. Again, the price is down, and the transportation costs are still up. There's some indication, I don't know how accurate this is, that industry is looking at options for sourcing lower quality sand closer to the well sites. We'll see how that works, but clearly the risks are there. This again is a kind of a projection for fracturing activity, which will reflect in sand use. The bottom color is the frac sand use. Back in 2011 and 2012 and 13, there were two studies that were done on the economic impacts of frac sand mining. The Farmers Union, the Towns Association did one of them, and UW Extension and Steve Deller, who we'll talk later, did another one, focused more on Buffalo County. They both had unique findings, but I think they were fairly in sync with regard to what they said. Basically, that frac sand mining will have both positive and negative impacts, and that both need to be considered. That mining will almost certainly share the same boom and bust cycles that have been typical of other extractive industries. That there's little evidence that we will be excluded from that. Unfortunately, long term, mining has a generally poor record of providing enduring economic benefits. So communities must plan for bust or downturns, and plan for hopefully a more diversified economy. In Farmers Union, we still think agriculture, of course, needs to be core of the economy. And maybe most importantly, that in light of all that, communities need to be able to manage development and be able to protect their interests. And that requires good policy and active democracy. Now, I don't want to make a lot out of this, but the pushback that we got was not surprising. And the pushback was, well, that's fine, that happens, but frac sand mining is different. And that won't happen here. And it's true to some degree, it is different, there's no question about that. But it's not completely different. And what we've seen is that, in fact, many of the same indicators that Professor Deller's study and the Farmers Union study and the Townsend study uncovered, in fact, are appearing. The industry said the economic impacts will be positive and enduring, that environmental concerns will be fully addressed and relatively easily managed, and that current regulatory oversight is adequate, and additional provisions for assuring local rights are unneeded and unproductive. I think we would question whether those, whatever you think about mining, I think those 3 points don't capture the kind of concerns that we need to address. So what do we see for the future? Well, I have a friend who says that I tend to look, he accuses me of looking at things from two perspectives. You always say, you say there are two sides to an issue, Tom. And you're wrong. There are not two sides to an issue. There are many sides to an issue, which of course is true. So when you think about scenarios for the future, there are many sides to what could happen, and we don't know for sure. The important thing is that we prepare ourselves as local governments, as county governments, and hope ultimately as state government to deal with them. But we expect in the industry projections and the EIA and all the people that are looking at it expect slower recovery than probably was projected. The demand for oil does not seem to be growing as quickly or as rapidly as people thought. That will put stress on operations that have high debt and high costs. Some of the speed to market development that we saw early on will struggle. The demand and price increases for oil will remain moderate over time. The demand for sand is projected to stabilize. The increased demand probably will not occur until at least 2017 and perhaps later. And then I think importantly, you're probably seeing this, is we can expect a consolidation in ownership of mines as weaker operations struggle. And this, I think, is something we also will see, is a move towards operations that will combine mining, processing, and rail on the same site. And I'm sure some of you are seeing that in your communities already. We expect that that'll happen. So that's kind of the overview. My friend Ron Koschek, who works a lot with local government on this, said that sometimes it's hard to be optimistic in the face of things that are going on. And Ron has a story about the Russian stories. When in Russia, we have a phrase that says that a pessimist is someone who says, things are bad and they just can't get worse. An optimist in Russia is someone who says, oh yes, they can. So, when we do this, when you sit around a town hall meeting or in a tough public hearing or you're working with your attorney or whatever, it sometimes feels frustrated and it's hard work, but it's important work. And I think we have a lot to be optimistic about.